Welcome to the On Brand Podcast, the show where we dive into branding, marketing, and living life on brand. I'm your host, Jessica Carr, a marketing strategist with over a decade of experience helping businesses of all sizes amplify their impact and connect with their audience. Together, we'll explore actionable strategies, inspiring stories, and the latest trends to elevate your business and personal brand. Whether you're an entrepreneur, a creative, or someone ready to make bold moves, you're in the right place. Let's do this. This week of the On Brand Podcast, I have Kyla Wood on here, who is a co-founder of a startup called Triptimize. I am super excited to be having this conversation as it's a topic that I'm actually really passionate about, which is women in tech. So I've had my fair share of experiences as a woman in a STEM field or a woman in tech, and Kyla has as well. So we're going to talk about that today. So Kyla, I'm going to let you introduce yourself a little bit.
Hey, so my name is Kyla. Like Jess had mentioned, I am a co-founder of Triptimize. Prior to that, I did work at GM as a software developer, and that was my first professional experience in the tech space. And I graduated online at WGU, and I mean, my total college time was 2 years. Not a huge brag or anything, but so yeah, that's a little bit about me in my professional space.
Well, you're getting your master's as well right now, right?
Yes, I am currently enrolled in the Masters of Business Creation program at University of Utah, which was recommended to me by my mentor. And I mean, it's been such a great experience so far.
Yeah, perfect. I love that. That's an amazing accomplishment to finish your bachelor's in 2 years and then to go on for a master's. That's incredible. What inspired you to pursue a career in the tech industry?
Definitely my dad. That was a huge motivation for it. When I was growing up, I would always see him working from home, and it was really nice to have this parent who I could always rely on to be there, whether he was working or not. That, and also the comfort of knowing it's generally a pretty secure field, really helped make that decision for me.
Yeah, so I'm going to do a little bit of a tangent. You said that it was a pretty secure field. How do you feel about the current field right
The
now?
current, I would say that's gone away a little bit.
Yeah.
Tech has definitely gotten more volatile in recent years. It's these companies, they want innovation, so they hire and hire and hire. They get whatever they want out of it, and then they lay off, lay off, lay off until it breaks massively, and then hire, hire, hire again. It just is a never-ending cycle, it seems.
Yeah, it sounds like a really vicious cycle right now, which is crazy to see like that happening in the tech industry because I remember I think we're about the same age. I remember going through my bachelor's degree and being told over and over again. So I was a computer science major for 2 years in college, and I remember being told the same thing, that it's a really stable field and there's a lot of job opportunities and it's only growing, and they showed all the graphs and all the stats and everything. And I was like, "Oh, that's something I should look into or pursue." And while I didn't finish my bachelor's in computer science for multiple reasons, it has been really interesting to watch that shift and see that conversation change for sure. So, have you always been passionate about technology, or did you find your way there unexpectedly?
It was somewhat unexpected because when I started my computer science degree, I did computer science because I felt like it was the most base, like you could kind of go anywhere in tech with that.
Yeah.
And then as I went through my courses, I went through with the intent, I'm just going to do design, like software design. I know I'm not super interested in front end because I'm not a very artistic person, but I don't want to have to write all this code and stuff. That just seems really intimidating. I don't want to do that. And then I finished my first Java class where I made something tangible that I could interact with and not just through some sort of terminal. And since that moment, that feeling, that elation of like making something that I can do something with, I was just like, oh man, I need to feel that again.
Yeah.
So it just kept going back and more coding to do it.
Yeah, that's fun. I love that. I remember when I first had computer science or coding on my radar, I was a freshman and I was actually working at the Entrepreneurship Institute at my university. And my boss had me work with the Open West Conference, which was being hosted at Utah Valley University. And It was so interesting interacting with these developers and these coders and everything for the first time and hearing them talk about what they were doing. And it almost felt like they were speaking a foreign language. And I was desperate to learn what that language was. And it was a lot of fun. And it definitely was like an unexpected thing for me, too. I think that women are not necessarily told or taught or encouraged as they're growing up to pursue tech or computer science or STEM. And so a lot of us find our way there unexpectedly, for sure. You said your dad was a software engineer, right?
So I mean, when I was littler, I had no idea what he did. I just knew
Yeah.
he worked with computers. Now I know very well what he does. He does application packaging.
Mhm.
So I know you've worked for a corporation before. You had a corporate issued laptop.
Mhm.
Yeah, so the applications that you're able to download from your company portal or your company website or whatever, application packagers make that possible. So when you click the install button, it just runs and you don't have to worry about it.
Oh, cool. Amazing. It's
Yeah.
cool to like hear that there's actually people dedicated to that. Did he can encourage you to go into STEM or computers or anything like that?
Oh yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Big time. He's definitely tried to get me into what he's doing a lot. I've been resistant, not because I don't think it's a great field or that it's important. I just find it so boring.
Yeah.
It's so boring, and I don't mean to demean or diminish the work that those people do for the packaging. It's just I find it much more gratifying if I can write a few lines of code, go in there and then see that it works, test it, or if it doesn't work, then that's where the real work starts of, oh, why isn't it working? Where's the problem? And using all of these problem solving skills that I've developed over time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. No, absolutely. There are people who are great for those types of roles and they're super happy with it and I love that, but I am also not one of those people. So, very happy for them. I'm glad they're fulfilled, but I would struggle with that as well.
Yeah, it's
So,
the act of creation that I like. Sorry,
yeah.
didn't mean to cut you off.
No, 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 you're totally fine. No, and I agree. I'm very like creative, not necessarily like artistically, like graphic. I'm not a graphic designer by any means, but that creative process is something that I really enjoy as well. So I understand that for sure. Yeah. What has been your experience as a woman in a male dominated field like tech or coding or development?
I will say my experience and how I view it might be a little bit different because I always feel like I'm in male dominated spaces. They're almost more comfortable to me at this point. Just not in a not like other girls way, just in a I grew up loving video games. Those are very
Mhm.
male dominated. Now I DM in Dungeons and Dragons. That's typically done by a man. So it's really I always view it as what I saw online of women do the same things as men, but we do it with heels and nails. I want to do it, but I always want the fact that I'm a woman to be present in that, but not overshadowing it for sure. And that's something that's really important to me. And I think some men do get intimidated by that.
Mhm.
And if they do, I just let that be their problem unless they try to address it directly.
Clap for that. I am clapping for that, literally. That's amazing. I think that's something that I had to learn too. I grew up in a culture that was very, uh, I guess patriarchal is the best word, very male centered. And I always was conscious about how I was being perceived by men. And as I've gotten older, I've had to learn to let that go and not care what men think. And I'm so much happier for it.
It
So,
can be hard to do for
yeah.
sure. I know you're Exmo, I'm Exmo. Like
Yeah.
growing up, the husband is the center of the household, and it's hard
Ugh.
to overcome not centering men ourselves.
Yeah. No. And it's so interesting, and we're going a little bit on a tangent here, but I
Yeah.
like where this is going. I was even just thinking right before we got on, I'm like looking around at my living space and seeing all the things. I'm looking at it right now. You can't see it on here. Like, yeah, all the things that need to be done around me. And I had this thought. It's like, no wonder why so many more men are successful. It's because they have a woman at home cleaning and doing all the mundane things around the house or anything else that needs to be done so they can focus on what they're doing. And women have never really had that luxury. I shouldn't say never. There are some women who have really supportive partners, and I'm so grateful for them. I love that they have that. You go, girl. Love that for you. But I am not someone who's ever experienced that or have been around it. My parents were the traditional Mormon household where my mom was a stay-at-home wife. She didn't have an education. She didn't, have a job or anything. And she raised my 3 little sisters and I while my father went off to work and built like this big business empire that he had. And just seeing that correlation and seeing that happening in my own space for sure is almost like a little frustrating to come to that realization.
Yeah, well, nowadays, those women are typically also working too.
Mhm.
If their husband has this big career as the primary breadwinner, we'll say,
Right.
but the woman typically is also working because, at least nowadays in America,
Yeah.
you can't have a single income family.
Yeah,
At
it's
least
very
most
rare.
people can't.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely very rare. It's very much a luxury to have a single income family now. And the sad part is a lot of women are still seeing that they are still responsible for everything at home and the kids and everything. Like those roles haven't really changed all that much. And they're still expected to go work. And it's really frustrating to watch that happen. And some of these conversations that I feel like women are trying to have with men, like it just doesn't seem to translate for some reason. And that can be really frustrating as well.
Yeah, definitely my partner, he's very equal with me. Like these dishes you see right there, they're clean. They're just drying, but he did those dishes because he knows I hate doing them. It's just little
Yeah.
things like that where he supports me and we both feel that it's an equal partnership. And if we don't, we talk about it.
Yeah.
And
I love
that's
that.
important to me.
Yeah, no, and I feel like it's important to a lot of women now, or more important than it was before. So I'm really glad that you have that. Does that help you with your business and being able to focus on that? Like knowing that you have that like partner to support you and like
So
kind of share that
much.
division of labor?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, so much. I'm gonna gush a little bit. I don't know what I'd do without him at this point. He takes care of so much. He makes sure that the cats are fed. He makes sure that they have their water, that I'm taking care of myself too. He'll bother me about eating because I'm very liable to forget about that and fills up my water if he notices it's empty. Just all those little things
Oh,
really
that's
help.
adorable. I love that for you. Oh, that's amazing. That's great. Have you this is totally once again another like tangent.
Tangent
Um
one.
there is a book called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Have you heard of
Heard
that
of
book?
I have not read it yet, but I have heard of it.
Yeah, there's a chapter on I'm probably gonna like butcher like how to say this sexual like transmutation, and so it talks about and it's usually like targeting men, or the book was like written for a male audience, and it essentially talks about in this chapter how it's important to have this was like written I don't know like maybe the 1920s, 30s, 40s like in that area, right?
Dang.
So very different time period, and he talks about how it's a man can only be successful if he has a woman at home to help him be successful. And I give that caveat for the time period that it was written because obviously things are very different now and we are more accepting of different types of relationships. I remember reading that and getting really frustrated though. I was like, what about the woman's perspective? Like, what about a woman? Like,
Yeah, what is she
what
doing?
is she
Like,
doing? Right. And actually, there was someone who almost did a revised version, like a woman. So the family of the author, because obviously he's passed long now, a long time ago. So the family of the author asked this woman to write Think and Grow Rich for Women. And so she took his principles and rewrote it. And essentially, what she said was that women don't need a man to be successful because women are the key to that success. And I actually really like that perspective. But with that being said, having a supportive person to make sure that you're taken care of or help with like different things that are mundane tasks so you can focus more on your business is extremely beneficial, but it's also not a requirement. So I
yes,
I liked that perspective.
definitely helpful.
Yeah.
Definitely helpful. I hope you can find someone eventually, if you want to, that
I'm not really in a
is,
rush.
that's why I say, if you want to.
I am enjoying this phase of life where I do not have a partner and I'm not in a rush to find anyone anytime soon. So
And I love that for you.
yeah.
It's
But
it's a
I
great spot.
right? It's very peaceful, but I also can acknowledge that it would be nice to have someone help with things occasionally. So, what have you ever, going back to our original like questions or topic, have you ever experienced or faced like gender bias or discrimination in your career or in the tech field? This is a big conversation that a lot of women have.
This is a big conversation, and I feel like a terrible person to be asked this question. I'm going to preface this with I think a lot of women do face discrimination pre-career. So before you actually get the job, right?
Gr-
Like you're pre-screened out of interviews.
Yep.
If you do get the interviews, you're likely chosen after a male candidate. I definitely feel like a lot of the jobs that I did apply for, if my name was Kyle, I would have
Mm-hmm.
maybe heard a few more back. So I'm going to preface with that. I was very fortunate to get into General Motors at what people call the height of GM culture. They were very accepting, and so it was mostly like small things, like the floor I worked on, one of the bathroom that would have been closest to my desk, they recently, this was in like 2021, they had to do this. They had to change the two male bathrooms to a male and a female bathroom.
Wow.
Just little things like that of
Wow.
just kind of layover stuff. The biggest thing was when someone bypassed me. I wrote a 20-page document. I was very proud of this document. Any of my friends can attest. I probably talk about it too much. Um, about this process for business to use for them to take over one of the jobs that we were kind of doing to flesh it out for them better. And then someone had a question about it. All my contact information is at the front of this, but someone had a question about this specific process. Went over to my male colleague who basically just plugged it in. And that was his entire involvement with that process, was just plugging it in so that it worked. And then they questioned him and he had to redirect them to me, basically. And that was when I noticed it the most, for sure. I didn't really bring it up with anybody up until then. I felt pretty respected in my career, but it definitely internalized like I am still a woman in a tech space for me.
Yeah.
And I guess how I handled it going forward is I just being a little bit more outspoken about my knowledge in this area, letting people know, hey, this is what I'm working on and this is what I know how to do. And if you have questions about those things, like you can come to me and ask.
Yeah. 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 I mean, those are definitely like, don't they call those like microaggressions?
But yeah, I don't think
Maybe.
I think it's a little bit more overt. It's more following like, I guess it does kind of fall under the microaggression umbrella of like those internalized
And
biases.
yeah. Yeah. Even though they were like small in scale, that doesn't mean that it wasn't like harmful or it didn't have, a negative impact on your morale or your ability to do your work effectively. I remember the first time I faced a major discrimination was because I used being a woman to my advantage before, like at the beginning of getting into the tech industry, right? Because I was like this cute little girl that would go in and talk to all these developers, and I wasn't afraid to be outgoing and ask them what they were doing. And they were like totally caught off guard, and they're like, yeah, we can share it. So I like learned to talk to them and get along with development teams. The first time I faced like a major discrimination was when I was working for a startup, and I was basically brought in as like a product manager, but they hadn't hired the person I was supposed to work under yet. And so they were asking me to fill in on other roles because it's a startup, all hands on deck. And so I was supposed to, one of the things they wanted me to help with was recruiting and HR kind of stuff, helping to like vet candidates and look at interviews that come in, update the website and like different job postings or whatever else. I remember they hired the person I was supposed to work under. So I, talked to one of the managers, or I guess he was the COO at the time. And I asked him, hey, when do I switch into my actual role? And he's like, what do you mean your actual role? I'm like, well, I was hired as like a product manager. Like, when do I switch into that role? And they said, why would we switch you into that role? You're just gonna get married and be a stay-at-home housewife anyway, so why would we invest that?
Well, oh my goodness.
Yeah. Yeah. Utah's a very different culture for sure when it comes to that. So that was just the first time I faced that discrimination. But I definitely agree that it's a lot of pre-hiring discrimination as well. Sometimes you don't even get the interview at all because you're a woman. And I've had the same thought. If my, resume said Jessie spelled with the male spelling rather than Jessica, I might have very different results.
I I applied for one company, LinkedIn, then auto followed me to their page. I forgot to click the thing off. And then I saw them congratulating two employees. And I looked at the picture. I'm like, why do they have the same person twice on here? What the heck? And I had to look really closely and I was like, oh no, those are two different people. But they looked so similar. I was like, oh, no wonder I didn't get a call back. I don't fit into that culture. That's the frat coder culture.
It's really sad. And it's like a blessing in disguise because you don't necessarily want to work in that
Oh
environment
yeah,
anyways.
no.
But at the same time, the fact that those environments exist is really sad.
Yeah. It's definitely it can be discouraging at times to look out and try to find something, a job in any STEM field really, and find people who look like you or who are even just accepting of what you look like and seeing that there's some places, sure, but there's also plenty of others that won't even look at you.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's extremely discouraging, especially when the data and the science shows that more diverse teams, and I guess maybe this seems like it's turning into a DEI conversation a little bit, but more diverse teams, especially teams with women, will on average have higher profit margins and more productive teams, better outcomes in product design development, and are more profitable overall. And so it's crazy that we don't listen to that data and we don't listen to that science more and we embrace that diversity and that, like I said, this is turning into that DEI conversation. That diversity and that inclusion, right, of other people and get other perspectives and different experiences to help enhance our products so we can reach a wider range of people and therefore be more profitable.
Yeah, this is highly diminutive, but it's very silly. It's very silly that we would rather just dig in our heel, not like we specifically,
Hmm.
just collective
Right.
generally.
As a
We'd
culture.
rather dig in our heels and try to resist these things than just open the doors a little bit.
Yeah. Right. It doesn't even make sense to me as like a marketing and business person, right? Who my job is to help companies make money, right? That's what I love doing. And to see these actions that are going to lead to the opposite happening, it just blows my mind a little bit. I'm like, what's our end goal here? What is our end goal? Is it to actually run things like a business? It doesn't seem like it sometimes. Anyways, so what can you do? It's hard not to get political on some of these things, but they end up inherently being a little political and it affects our everyday life. Um,
Our existence is basically.
that is a hard fact right there. That is a hard fact. Are there any specific moments that made you realize how different the experience can be for a woman in tech besides what you've already mentioned? Is there anything that you've noticed overall in the industry that you've observed, that any conversations that are happening?
I think it's culminated into my business partner actually recently shared this today, and it just clicked in for me where he shared that most venture capitalist companies invest in men and get maybe exactly what they put out, like one time profit return versus, and that's 97% of the money that they throw out is going to men founders.
Yeah.
3% goes to women founders, and they see 2.5 times return on that.
That's why.
And it just really lifted the curtain for me. Let me see past that of it's not a lack of skill because I have imposter syndrome huge in
Oh,
a
we all
lot of
do. We all
areas.
do.
Like,
Absolutely. Yeah.
it's not this lack of skill, it's this lack of recognition for women of doing things. In GM, I kept getting told by my male colleagues, "Why are you trying to pick stuff up? Why are you trying to pick stuff up? You've been here a month. Why are you trying to pick up bugs and stuff?" And I'm like, I've been here a month and I've basically done nothing. Like, I need to do something. I need to prove myself. I can't just keep coasting like this.
Yeah. That's crazy that yeah, like there's not like the ambition, like the effort or the, what's the word I'm looking for?
The hunger.
The motivation, that's extremely frustrating, just like wanting to coast and not do more. Like, and I've realized that in women overall, we're always trying to do more and be more efficient, more effective. We're always like, it's not just that work ethic, really. And it's so frustrating to see that they're not, valued or recognized more for it, for sure. And that's just throughout history. You hear about all these women who were absolutely geniuses, and their husbands took credit for everything that they did. And so Einstein, actually, it turns out, was one of them. So Einstein was believed to be this amazing genius, and it turns out a lot of his work was actually his wife, which is
Women put man on the
crazy.
moon.
Yeah. What's that? Actually, when you mentioned the bathroom situation at your old job, there was that movie that talked about the woman with the first moon launch. What is it? Is Hidden Figures, I think it is.
Oh, I don't think I've seen that movie,
Oh,
actually.
it's good. So it talks about these women who were computers, right? Because they didn't have computers, so it was these women who came in and did math, and most of them were African American women. And their calculations were the reason why we were able to get a man on the moon. And a lot of them there was like this one woman in the movie where she was like working with the main team directly, and there was no restroom in the building for her. So she had to walk 40 minutes across the campus
Oh
to go
my
to the
goodness.
restroom every day and 40 minutes back because there wasn't a restroom in the building for her because of segregation. And it was like a whole thing where they're like, "Where are you gone all day? You're gone half the day." She's like, "Yeah, I'm walking to the restroom." Like, it just blows my mind. So actually, when you mentioned that situation at your last job, it reminded me of that. It's, what are we doing here?
It's just that's such a basic thing too. Every human needs to do it.
Right. And it's crazy. Yeah, no, especially when you're going back to talking about VC investment, you would think that they would want to invest in more women if they're getting it 2.5 times their investment back. That's insane. Ah, so frustrating
As that's being a woman in general at this point.
at this point, right? What, speaking of that and trying to get through it, what maybe, and I hate saying it this way, but it's a failure to think of another way of saying it. Like, what strategies or mindset shifts have helped you, work through these obstacles?
One of them, one of the smaller ones for me, GM had this tool. It was the implicit bias tool. So it's
Mm.
basically trying to find your blind spots and it was just simple, like word picture association, which, fun fact, I have a slight implicit bias for women in office and men at home. Just,
Don't we all have a little bit of bias? And the key is to recognizing that, right?
oh,
Like, to be
yeah,
able
for
to say,
sure.
like, "Hey, I have bias in this area," and when you can recognize it, you can and admit that, then you can actually look at it from another perspective.
I'm very happy to say that most of my biases were small, if not neutral. So I was very
Mhm.
happy about that because I always try to be very thoughtful of these
Yeah.
things. But having that pointed out to me, it also opened my eyes. Other people are going to have these implicit biases that they're working with. And I know that a lot of them are probably going to be very reverse of mine. For strategy, I always try to this is just for anybody. Everybody should do this. I try to approach people with kindness, with
Yeah.
openness, with just like, hey, do you know this thing? Or I'm trying to get this done. Can you help me out with it? Definitely having patience with people. I didn't call out the person who went to my coworker instead of me. I just went, answered their question the best that I could, offered any of my other time if they wanted to go over it in more detail, and just let that be because people get defensive. They put walls up if you try
Yeah.
to point those things out. And then it turns into this, oh, well, I didn't mean anything, but I wasn't doing anything. So I just find it easier to let it go at this point. Understanding it's not personal is really helpful. It's not you. Even if they're screaming upset at you for some reason, it's not you, it's
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
That really helps. So it's just a lot of being in these kinds of situations and getting to the other side of them just has given me a mindset of just letting things wash off. Because at the end of the day, if you aren't signing my checks, which in the very near future, I'm going to be signing my checks, so it's going to be nobody else. I don't really care what you have to say. I don't care what you're thinking. I want to do good work. I want to make something valuable for people. And I just want to enjoy my life with my cats and my partner.
I love that. That what you just said though reminded me of like the phrase that if they're not funding you, if they're not feeding you, or if they're not effing you to keep this G-rated, I guess PG, then their opinion
PG.
doesn't matter. If they're not doing any of those three, then their opinion really doesn't matter. And I think that's been the nice thing about getting older and gaining more maturity as I've gotten older. They really do. It is really true that when you get into your 30s that life is so much better because or I should say a big reason why is because you stop caring what other people think about you. And I just don't care anymore. It's like you can think whatever you want of me, like it doesn't affect me in my day-to-day life. And it's not to say that you don't care about the impact that you're having on people.
Oh, for
It's more
sure.
you don't care about the negative opinions that other people have on you, and you're not going to let
Absolutely.
it dictate your life anymore. Yeah.
I haven't been cool my whole life. If I'm not cool tomorrow, nothing changes. Like,
I think you're pretty cool. That's just
someone thinks I'm cool. Oh my God.
wow, I remember the first time we met, we were like vibed so hard and I was like, "Oh my God, I love this girl. I have a slight girl crush on her. She's amazing."
I I think you are just so strong for having your
Oh,
own company and you
oh,
seem
oh,
so successful and so happy, and that's the big thing is you seem genuinely happy, and that just
oh,
really I think that helped me open up a lot too, is just how genuinely happy and open
oh.
you were.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think that really comes from it's really interesting. When I was younger, I was like overly positive and optimistic. Like I had to be positive. I had to be optimistic about everything. And I realized that it was actually toxic positivity. And it was because if I thought anything negative or if anything negative happened, I would just fall apart. Because all your previous trauma, we know trauma, our upbringing, we've experienced that. That's all we'll say about that. But with all that trauma I had growing up and what I was told about myself, that if you had a relationship before you were married, like any sort of actual relationship
Anything.
or
You get
anything, right?
touched, ruined.
Right. Anything like that. Exactly. You're a licked cupcake. And it's really damaging to teach young women that their value is wrapped up in a man, either being married to a man or being valued by a man or how a man views them. Any of that is extremely damaging to women. So it's, working through that trauma and spending a couple years really diving deep into that and pulling it out and just processing that. It helped so much because now I can be happy and it's not like a toxic positivity. It's a genuine happiness. It's not like that fake happiness. So it's definitely been a journey to get there, but we all have our own days, right? There's
Oh,
days
yeah.
where I'm not super happy like anyone because we're human, but overall, I'm so much happier than I was 10 years ago, for sure.
Yeah, and I'm glad. Like I said, I felt it off of you. I think
Oh,
it might have been that similar,
yeah,
just vibrating at the same frequency because I've been
love
through a
that.
very similar journey of
Yeah.
working through my own trauma and then getting to that other side where I'm a lot happier, I'm comfortable in my skin and just living my life.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love it. I love that little moment. Back to our main topic at hand after we had a little girl bonding.
Yes.
Um, what advice would you give to women looking to step into first the tech industry and then maybe moving into leadership roles?
Absolutely. For tech industry, it's a lot of the same advice. If you have a warm contact, use that. There's 100 different career coaches that will tell you these things.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
definitely don't be courageous, I think is a big first one.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
even if you feel half of the bullet points that they're listing, go for it.
Yeah. Actually, I'm going to
Like,
interrupt a little bit there because
yeah,
there was a study that showed that men will apply for a job if I think they meant, was it 40% of the requirements, you know what I'm referring to?
I'm not
Like,
sure if it's that one. I
there,
just see it listed as general advice, but
so there was actually a study done. I can't remember the exact number, but I believe it was something like men will apply for a job if they meet 40% of their requirements. But women feel like they have to meet 100% of their requirements before they'll apply. And that blew my mind when I saw that. And it changed my perspective about applying for roles and positions because it was just like, oh, I'm doing this wrong. And you'd be a little bit more courageous in that
yeah.
sense where I don't need to meet 100% of the requirements. Like, all that's for the ideal candidate if they could have everything perfect in life, but life isn't perfect and they're not going to find that person.
Yeah,
Or it's
and
very,
I mean,
very rare if they do.
like, tacking on to that as well is like, I used to look for 80%. If I had at
Mhm.
least 80, I've relaxed that down a little bit now. But even if you don't meet all the experiential requirements, if I have strong skills here, like, go for it. The worst they can do is say no.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
definitely, it takes a lot of courage. You will probably run into an interview where maybe they ask you a question you don't know, or you do and you don't answer it as well as you could have, but don't get discouraged. You just gotta keep going. It's, I can't just guarantee you'll blanket find something because right now the market is
Right.
doing what it's doing. But
So, would you recommend maybe more entrepreneurial routes since the job market's so crazy? Or how do you feel about, since you're like a co founder of a tech startup, how do you feel about the startup space right now?
um I think it depends on what your idea is. I think
Yeah.
it depends on what you want to do and it depends on the problem you want to solve. And I'm not going to say that, oh, you need to have this absolutely groundbreaking idea for an application. But just as long as you're not repackaging a lot of, and my co founder would go really long on this tangent. I'm just going to mention it offhandedly. But as long as you're not just repackaging ChatGPT and then throwing it up on the App Store, build something that you love to build something that has some sort of, I mean, you're at the end of the day, if you're going entrepreneurial, you're a business, you should make money and you shouldn't be ashamed of that either. And I
Yeah.
think that's a big thing for like, it's something I had to get over a little bit
Yeah.
too, where my mentor, because I asked him, I was like, should we include our salaries as founders
Oh
when
my
we're
gosh.
asking for funding? Because I want to get paid, but I don't want to ask for money. And he's like,
Yeah.
it's assumed that you would put it in there,
Oh my
please.
God. That is such a big thing for women. We have such a hard time advocating for ourselves and wanting to get paid. And I think it's because a lot of us are purpose driven and
Mhm.
we want to just help people. And women are more empathetic in nature. And we're also conditioned not to put ourselves first. And so there's a couple different factors playing into that. And you hit so close to home for me because I had the same issues, or I've had to work through the same things where I really have a hard time advocating for myself, or I used to. I'm better about it now. But it's so hard working through that sometimes and getting rid of that, realizing, no, I'm allowed to make money. And there's
Yes.
nothing wrong with me making money. And so I tell myself that the more money I make, the larger the impact I'm having. So I've reframed how I think about money in my head to help me through that. Be like, if I'm having a large impact, I'm helping a lot of people. And that's something that's helped me work through that mindset for sure.
Yeah. And you're definitely allowed to want money too, at least enough to be comfortable.
Right?
There's nothing wrong with that.
You don't have to live in
So,
squalor, like I promise.
so definitely that's a big one for, I, I think women in general is you're allowed to make money, especially if it's your product. Don't be afraid to negotiate if you get a job offer for a
Mhm.
higher salary. I'm sure men do it all the time. We need to step
Yeah.
up to that as well.
Yeah.
And then going into leadership, it's a little bit more of the same of being courageous. There might be people who try to step up or try to give you some sort of backlash on things. I'm very sad to present my video game example, but I will anyway, where I, for a while, was helping not raid lead, but heal lead because I play healer. I'm pretty good at
Hmm.
it sometimes.
Yeah.
And I was helping with strategy, and I basically just said, "Hey, how about we try this?" Nobody says anything, nobody comments on it. One of my one of the other people on raid council basically said the same thing but louder. Oh yeah, we should try that. It's just okay, that's great.
Yeah.
That was my idea. And he even admitted, yeah, she said that first. We should really,
Well, at least he did that.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just so don't be afraid to make suggestions. Just don't be afraid in general. Step
Yeah.
up, own it if you want to be leadership. It's stressful, but you'll rock it out probably. I believe at least.
I feel like women are the natural leaders, not men, personally. I don't know. I'm a bit of a misandrist, though. I will fully admit that. I am totally a girl's girl. I think women in general are, because we're so empathetic and because we do value our education and we are observant and we do try to address our biases, I do feel like it gives us a more, or at least a better perspective of the world. And that turns into better leadership. Because leaders aren't just leaders are also followers. Right? So in
Yeah.
order to be a good leader, you have to be a good follower, which means lifting up your team. If you're going to be in a leadership role, you need to be able to say, hey, this team member of mine has these strengths and we're going to utilize it. And their suggestion is what we're going to go with because that's what their strength lies in. I've been in teams or in situations where I had to explain to my leader or whoever I was working under, say, look, you hired me for a reason. I need you to trust that. I need you to trust the reason why you hired me. Don't micromanage me. Let me do my work. And it's really funny, actually, Duolingo, the app company, right? That's actually
Love
a
Duo.
big, yeah, Duo and the owl. I think almost everyone has seen the whole marketing strategy for that. And it's so fun. They recently killed off Duolingo or the Dual Owl. And there was like a whole social media craze. There's a whole PR craze about it. It was crazy. And I remember seeing someone's post on LinkedIn saying, this is what happens when you let the chefs cook. Let your chefs cook. Let your social media people do social media. Don't micromanage them. Don't do red tape. Let them do what they do, because when you do, they have amazing results. So let your team do what they're supposed to be doing. And so it takes a really good leader, put aside that ego, and uplift their team and follow their team as well. And I think women in general are better at that, in all honesty. And from what my experience has been, that women are really good at being like, hey, go for it. You know, this is your specialty, do it. Go for it. Own it.
I think a little bit of that phenomena is because women are so heavily screened going into those roles. It's
Mm,
you have to be working so hard, you have to be doing
yeah.
everything, touching the right
Yep.
people, doing all that stuff. Whereas, and I don't want to seem diminutive, but a lot of times men don't have to jump through these same hoops
Yep.
to get these same positions.
I mean,
And
we saw
so,
that, not to get like super political, but we saw that in the last election where someone said Kamala Harris needs to be flawless. Well, Donald Trump got to be lawless. He could do literally anything and no one would care. But she did one little thing out of line or misspoke about one issue and was like a huge deal.
yeah,
So, yeah, I mean, that's just women dynamics in the workplace in general.
it's the last little piece of advice I would say is don't lose your voice. And I mean this in both a metaphorical and a very literal sense. A lot of women in workspaces will actually lower their voice register so they'll talk like low like this to be
Mhm.
taken more seriously in their workplace. And I don't agree with that. Frankly, I think it's baloney. I think it's bull hockey. I can say a lot of words about it, but I don't think it should be necessary for me to talk in a lower register to be taken seriously.
Oh, 100%. I agree. And I have caught myself doing that before, actually. And when I've noticed that when I'm working or when I have worked for corporations or worked on a team or worked for a large company before, I definitely had a very different personality. I had a very different tone of voice. I had a different octave of voice versus when I'm working for myself. I'm so much more authentic. I say things more freely. My voice has completely changed. It's a lot higher. And it's crazy to see the difference in that. And it's yeah, so I totally agree with that. That's yeah, and it's something I didn't even consciously think of until you just said that.
Yeah, I, again, video games is always my example because it's
Yeah.
like the epitome of the male dominated space.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I realized I was taken the exact same amount of serious no matter how I spoke. So I just speak like I do.
Yeah. I love that. No, that especially that authenticity is so crucial because people are repelled by perfection. People want authentic. They want messy.
Mhm.
They want to see the real you. Like, that's why influencers do so well, or at least a lot of them, going back to marketing. A lot of influencers do really well because they're authentic and they're messy and they share the lows and the highs and whatever else. And then you see other examples like, for instance, the Kardashians, they have so much hate against them because they try to be perfect. And people hate that. People hate perfection because we're not perfect and we can't relate to that.
Yeah, we're all humans.
Yeah.
That's my big thing. Anybody I engage with, I'm a human, you're a human. We're both just humans. So
We're
let's figure
all
this out how humans do.
we're all just together on this floating rock.
Hurtling through space.
Like, we should try to help each other while we're here, right?
Oh,
Oh,
100%.
I love that. Perfect. Tell me while we wrap things up, tell me a little bit more about Triptimize and your company so
Oh,
people know a little bit more about it.
the little self plug I get. Yay. Triptimize is a mobile first application, I should say, designed to help you plan a trip in minutes. We are looking to launch next month. You can see our website on triptimize.app. That's Tripti. Oh gosh, I can't spell like this.
I'll put the link in the
If you
show
could put
notes.
it on there,
I will.
don't make me spell on air. But it's Triptimize.app. It's going to have a big redesign in the future. I'll plug Jessica here a little bit because she's definitely going to be helping us with that, with our branding and everything, because she's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, we have full functionality. It'll be full end-to-end trip planning. The ultimate goal, which I will be helping develop and design, is to make it so you can book your entire trip with the touch of one button.
Yeah.
That's a little bit far up on the horizon, but that's where the iterations will be heading in the future.
I love that. I am a big traveler. I'm a digital nomad. And so that's something that I always struggle with. And that's why it's been so fun to work with you and your business partner so far, is because I can relate to the issues that you're trying to solve so much. Trying to find attractions, places to stay, things to do, the reviews, doing all the research. It takes hours to do that. And so your platform is going to allow people to do it all in minutes, which is incredible.
We want it so the planning your trip is exciting, maybe not as fun as the trip itself, but enables that super fun trip in a very short amount of time.
It's a close second to how fun the trip is itself.
Exactly.
I love it. I love it. Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Kyla, for being on the podcast. I think this is a really good discussion that's very much needed. And I
Thank you
would
for
say,
having me.
of course, and I would just plug in for anyone listening as well, especially young women looking at the space, that if you don't if you can't find your community, create that community. And that's something that I've had to do where I couldn't find my community and I've created it. And I've created an amazing ecosystem of women in my life, Kyla being one of them, that I can go to or I can rely on or we can work together. And if you can't find it, just make it. I promise there's going to be people out there that struggle with the same things or have a similar mindset as you, and they're looking for you too. So
If you build it, they will come.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, the marketer in me wants to say like, well, you have to advertise it too, but you have to let people know it's there. Anyways, once again, so thank you so much, Kyla, for being on the podcast. This was such a great discussion.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to the On Brand podcast. If you found today's episode valuable, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who'd love it too. Until next time, keep amplifying your impact and living on brand.